this trip was an exploratory delegation with a regional approach. And Council of Governments, which I am a member of their board, has been engaged in a regional approach to economic development. So it was Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia. Mayor Bowser led the delegation, and the Greater Washington Hispanic Chamber was the entity that organized this trip. Basically share and explain exactly what it is that we have going on here in this area. What are our assets, for Montgomery County, really talking about our biotech, life science, for example, approaches, the different areas that we're looking at developing. They were very good at explaining exactly what were the areas where there's agreement that developing the infrastructure, economic development, partnerships, healthcare and education are not two of the areas that they have identified in their portfolio. I think they feel that this is an area where they would be happy to share, not necessarily they believe that they need assistance in those too. Personalized healthcare is definitely one of the hallmarks, obviously, of what we were able to experience there and see firsthand. And the way they do it is that they basically have this hub, and then they have a family doctor every 3 blocks. And that's the way that the network has been set up. Obviously they don't make that much money. I mean, there's just a very, stark difference in the cost, obviously differential. It's so personalized that if you went, for example, and you were diabetic and somehow you missed the next appointment, they would literally send somebody to your house to make sure and understand why you didn't come. It is quite remarkable that access to healthcare is pretty universal. We learned that 60% of the budget goes to education. We learned that, for example, women get a year of paid maternity leave, and then childcare is completely paid for, and pre-K is completely paid for, and then education is totally free, and it's mandatory until 9th grade. But most people go on to college, and university is free, but you do have to repay back through service, some type of service where the government decides whether you're going to be placed for 3 years. And so it's kind of extraordinary. I mean, I had heard stories of people saying, cab drivers have like master's degrees and PhDs, and it's absolutely true. I mean, there is a palpable sense of joy of learning and a high degree people with extraordinary levels of education. You can just see it everywhere. But that's how they've been able to manage basically a almost 100% literacy rate. I am originally from Minnesota. There were a lot of things that, in terms of the music, things, just cultural nuances that, of course, were very familiar. But then also trying to understand, how this particular model of government, how it has had its successes and also what could be considered its shortcomings. As policymakers, our goal should always be to find ways to move forward. When I think of the Cuban people, I cannot help but hope that we can definitely find a way forward. We can both benefit, people in the United States and people in Cuba, from developing a much stronger relationship.